Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube video, Art Classes My Way. And today's video we're going to be doing some simple pendant making, like a lot of the time, I know. And I got this random little stone. I have no idea what it is. It was just in a bin with a whole bunch of other random little stones of all different kinds. And if you ever go to a gym show, you'll see a bunch of these bins. You get these things for like $1, $2, depending on where you go. And we've already started a couple of things here. We got a weave here that I have done. There is a gap of 7 wraps. There's also a cat. And then I came round from one side as if I was going to start going around another time in the middle, and then I end up going around the whole thing and then come back and then do the 7 wraps again and over and over and over. And I did do something slightly different though. The last 3 wraps I instead came from around the side, over, wrapped around, and then came around the other side and wrapped around, and then I left a nice long wrap on the ends, and I just pretty much eyeballed it when it felt like it was pretty much even. This is all with plated copper, sterling silver plated copper, so it is nickel free. The smaller wire is 26, while the larger gauge wire is a 20. Now I'm using the 20 base wire for the cage that we got going on here. And the cage it's going to be one of those simpler wraps where you want to go around a few times through one wire. I've left this wire available and I've left these other 2 wires available. This wire is going to be on the back. I'm not going to have a whole bunch on the back, but one is more than enough to hold the stone in by the time it's all said and done. And then these 2 could end up being slightly more decorative along the front. We'll see as we go. So that leaves this second guy on the back half where I did my wraps along the side. You can wrap it as many times as you want. Bare minimum of 3 wraps around. And then I just did a good amount of wrapping along the bottom, and depending on the stone you use, since this guy's got a nice wide little bottom here, kind of a guitar pick shape, I decided to just go a little bit more than usual than what most people would do for these. And then once I did that, I just did a few more wraps going the other direction. Bare minimum of 3. You want to try to, you know, get something relatively even, but it's not crucial. Nobody's really going to be looking at the bottom of your piece. Once I got that done, now if you're wanting to know about the length of the wire, that is a pretty simple matter. You just take one wire, figure out how much it's going to take to go completely around. You're going to want some extra just in case you want to do some extra filigree work, but at least you're going to want about 1 inch or 2, so that way you can make the clasp that it goes through along the top. Bare minimum anyway. If anything after that, you could just cut them all short and be done with it. But anyway, so after putting all of these guys together, then you just start shaping it with your fingers. And with these stones that are rounded on the edges, it's not easy and it's not fun. Good luck. But you take your time, and the more time you put into trying to get this guy shaped correctly, the better it's going to be for you in the long run. Now when it comes to the back wire, once I got this in the pretty much the correct shape, you can see that the other wires here that are going to be more or less supporting the sides, they pretty much meet up at the top of this piece, and there's a little bit of a gap there. We can always fix that once we get to the weaving portion of this. But you can see there's a bit of a gap here. Now this guy, I ended up making these meet in the middle. That pretty much takes this whole shape inwards. And And it allows me to have a really nice little cage on the back. It mimics the shape. Even though it's smaller, it's going to hold the overall piece in nicely. And probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these two wires and I'm going to duck them in through that hole. Even though we really don't need to use the hole. Might as well, it's there. We can turn it into a decorative element. But it just creates a little bit of visual interest. But that's pretty much how you do that part of it. Let's see there. Now from this point, I haven't quite decided yet. I'm thinking I am going to put you out of my way. I'm thinking I'm wanting to make something that's a little bit more lopsided. So I'm thinking I'm going to wrap basically what I did on the bottom here and do it along the side right over here. So that way these guys are kind of permanently attached to each other. They're not going to end up being any kind of decorative element unless, you know, the top ends up being a decorative element. I want it to be more of a base. And I'm thinking about taking maybe even several sets of pre-woven area and taking it down one side of the piece, you know, like a little bit more like a, oh, I'm trying to think of the right term here. Kind of like thinking of like what came to mind was Japanese paintings, where you got paintings of the ocean, and the ocean's like, typically it's heavier on one side of the piece, and then you'll have like a figure standing over here, you know, solitary, kind of like. And the ocean's always so massive, and it's swirling and chaotic, and the white foam on top of the waves. And that's kind of what I was thinking with this piece. The stone, it's really dark. It's got some nice things about it, but even then, the reds that are in this stone, there's such a dark red that they don't really pop out very much. So I was thinking about basically making this piece, it's not as much about making the stone the focal as much as it is the stone just being the background, kind of like the sky in one of those Japanese paintings, and the real focus is the nature and the swirling, chaotic ocean on the corner side that creates the drama. So that's kind of what I was thinking with this piece here. So the next thing I am going to do is I'm going to close this guy up, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of close these three wires together, more or less. And I'm going to start off with the middlemost wire. I'm going to wrap around that guy about 3 times. Why not go for an extra? I'll go 4. Got my little tail there, and I'm going to close them all up and go around and around. Now this area is pretty much going to be covered with the decorative elements, my filigree work, so I don't care really the number count so much on this point because it's going to be all covered up. And you want to make sure that your wires are laying nice, neat, and close together. You don't want very much slack in them, but you don't want to also pull them too tight, like I kind of done. You want there to be enough space in between that you can get your final wrap done, like down here. Without so that way that those little bits can actually get closer. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this tail off and put it in my recycles. I'm actually going to work on spacing these guys a little bit more, making this a little looser. the further you tend to wrap something in this particular manner, the harder and harder it is to leave gaps in between. It's just the nature of the beast. I'm going to come in here with my square nose, and I'm going to just give this a light little squeeze. This flattens the wire out, so that way hopefully I can gain back some of what I've lost, and it feels nice and tight that way. Instead of getting this kind of rounded feeling, it gives it a little bit more of a square feeling. And we'll try to go down the middle here, pull through, and start going around that middle wire, getting all of that there. There we go. As best you can. Give that a little bit more gap. Slide, and another squish. There we go. Now that'll help out with the cage quite a bit. And if you can see there. That looks a lot neater and a lot nicer. Now I'm going to go ahead and take these guys. I'm going to go ahead and thread them through like I was talking about a little bit ago. Thread them through that hole, and this is the easiest time to do it. You can have the whole piece finished and together and done, but you're gonna have to like put a kink in the wire and thread it through. This way at least it's gonna look a little nicer, and I know I'm pretty guilty of it, just going ahead and building the whole structure and like, oh okay, yeah, I'll use the wire, I'll thread the wire through the hole here, and then my wire gets slightly munched just a little bit. I mean, I'm as guilty of it as the next person, but you know. So just kind of fold that guy over where we want him to be. Just a little bit. I'm just kind of slightly putting a little pressure, pulling it through, and also kind of holding it downwards. I'm going to put some pressure on the back here. Okay, kind of crisscrossed in there, so. There we go. Then go back to holding these guys closed. It's not perfect yet, but you can get the overall idea of how this cage is going. It's supposed to go. Of course, these guys are loose, so they're going to be mischievous as all get out. And then we can always just reshape. Alright, so got that part pretty much done. And I think I'm going to decide to go ahead and completely wrap this one middle wire with what's left of my silver filigree here. Not filigree, but my weaving wire. And I'm going to wrap it all the way up to where this kink is. And then I'm going to jump over here and kind of do the same thing over here, except I'm going to do it right where I think these guys are going to pretty much meet, where I've kind of folded them over where they meet at the top. And hopefully we'll just merge these two. So I won't bore you with this part. Again, I'm just going to go ahead and weave up to my kink, or just go round and round and around the middle wire up to this kink. And then I'm going to basically put these 3 wires together, but I'm going to do it from about here. And actually, these two areas might just get woven together all the way around. I want these guys loose on this side because they're going to be a little bit of a decoration over here. And you'll see pretty soon. So I'll be back with you guys. One moment. Alright, so I have gotten a little bit further here. Now all I pretty much did, I went ahead, I did the weave up the side here, so that way these three wires, I plan to do something decorative with them along this part here. So they're pretty much all three in front, but I have this guy holding on to the back as we discussed before. And then I did the weave of this wire, went up the side, and I decided I needed just a little bit more stability in order to give it the kinks up here at the top where it's going to turn into the rest of the piece with the part that the necklace will go through right about in here. And then I just folded these guys over to kind of hold this top in place. So I'm going to go ahead and finish that off by grabbing a hold, holding these guys nice and tight in the position I want them to be in, and just go ahead and just wrap that plainly and neatly. And my end design of what I'm thinking is going to, this piece is going to look like. Of course, what I plan does not always end up being what happens. This whole part should be covered. Now this little piece here, I don't have enough of it to go home and fold it back, so I'm going to use my square nose and just kind of roll it all over to the side, and that takes care of it pretty nicely. And just push that little tail down and go ahead and finish squish and squish like so. And this again is all going to be covered up pretty much. Now this piece, I don't know what I'm going to do with it just yet. I could just leave it going over, but where it's going to go after that, just to kind of create that nice little symmetry that's going on there, I could just go ahead and wrap it around but lower. And that kind of helps fill up the gap that is formed between the top of this stone and where these wires meet on top. I mean, it's a little one, but it does help to fill that gap up and hide the gap. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of give it a curl, and I'm going to hide that pointed in inside of that gap. And once it's in there, just take my square nose, give it a little squish, and just send it right down inside where it can't be seen as much. And again, we're going to be taking decorative elements and coming around the sides and so on. And this guy is still pretty easy to pop out overall. I mean, he's not going to pop out the back portion, and I mean, you know, he's not extremely evenly in there either. But that's just going to take a little bit more work. And the most important thing is for him to be pretty much follow this edge. Even though this edge is going to get covered, this edge doesn't quite matter as much because I do plan to go over and kind of kink these things and make a little bit of a decoration with them. And I didn't want to weave them too much, so that way I could, once I make those kinks, which why not go ahead and do that now, which I'm just going to grab a hold of an area and just kind of pull it inwards. We could see that we got a lot of extra wire right here, so we're just going to go through. See, I know these three belong to that side, these three belong to this side. Now I should just be able to pull this guy and take up some of that slack. It'll take a little bit. Whoop! Took a little too much. But yeah, you can get the general idea of what we're trying to go for. Pull a little bit more down. Just a bit. There we go. That's more what I intended. And then we can take and kind of put my finger in here so that way this side is still pretty much holding to the shape, of this part of the stone right here. Now this part doesn't much matter to me as much. I'm going to go grab a hold in the same place and pretty much do the same thing. And then, let's make it a little bit more dramatic actually. And then one more time. I want this one to be a little one, so I'm going to put my finger here to try to make sure that whatever I change is basically going to happen right in here. Very careful. This is one of my weaving wires that ended up snapping off on me while at the end when I was done, when I was trying to adjust everything. And if you want to take your hopper and kind of smooth out some areas that maybe didn't turn out the way you wanted in the first go, feel free. I like using my hopper for this kind of task because it has this long flat side here to help me make things just a little bit more rounded. And I think I want to give this guy a little bit of a pull, so it'll be that middle one. Oop. And there we go. We got a nice little decoration going on. I'm going to spend a little bit more time working it a little bit and getting some of these little kinks out of it, so I won't make you watch it, but it's basically going to be taking the round nose and the square nose and just working out some of these little fubs. And just kind of evening them out, taking the round nose, recurling just a few little areas here and there. And trying to get some of these areas just a little bit more even with itself. So I will be back very shortly, but you can already see that's already done a big difference. And I think I might, just for adding a sense of texture and a sense of depth or difference, I might even wrap this middle one. It's starting to get a little bit munched a tiny bit, so that would help hide that and make it look a little nicer. And again, that sense of textural depth, and especially in contrast with all those nice lines, plus adding this guy into this side and so on. So we'll see. So see you guys soon. Alright, so I hope you're ready for this little bit. Now, if you noticed before this stone, he would have been pretty easy to slide out this direction. There isn't anything holding him in there that wouldn't keep him from flip-flopping around very much. Now, as stupid as this seems, and as small as an adjustment as it is, all I did to solve that was take a little part of this right here, which this wire wasn't doing anything over here at all. Just took a little bit of it and brought him downwards, like so. And that's all it took to pretty much make this very stable in here and keeping him from rotating around. And I'm using a fair bit of force. And trust me, it's not this guy, because he was coming out regardless of this guy being here on the side right there. All it was just this. Sometimes it's the teeniest, tiniest solutions that can solve a lot of problems. Now, if I really tried to, I could pull this out. But then again, if I really tried to, I could also pull it out the other direction too. You know, that's just a matter of how much you want to destroy your own piece. Now for the next part here, we got this pretty much solidly done. Got this all wrapped, solving the fact that it got a little bit munched, a little bit more. I really didn't intend for it to get munched up actually at all, but it did end up happening, and solving and fixing our own problems by wrapping it, and I think it looks rather nice. Now I'm going to take this wire that I have pre-woven, and actually I wove this for another project entirely and didn't end up even using it for that project. So as far as comparing lengthwise and everything, it seems long enough to do something with it with this project and having it be a little bit of a decorative element. If this was half the length, I don't know if I would go ahead and try to use it for this, but since it is the length that it is, I think it'll work out fairly well. So I'm going to take this part right here and fold it over and around, maybe. And then can secure that just a little bit with the square nose here, and just kind of, you know, just finish folding it in on itself a little bit. Oh, it's got a good little grip right there. Wrap it back around so it's on the back and not the front. I really don't want that on the front. I'm going to go ahead and just pull this guy downwards. And we can do a couple of things from this point. You can take a piece of dowel rod and you can basically form this guy holding onto the sides and shape him that way. I'm going to just do it with my fingers here, but a dowel rod would give you a much more even and smoother curve. But I'm just going to do it with my fingers. A little bit like so. And then, I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to go ahead and just fold him around the back here. And I'll just go ahead and curve him up, round. I think I'm going to have him duck back down underneath himself here. Just going to put this edge down on the table here so that way I have something nice and hard to push against while I'm putting this in. And now this is working out way better than expected, because that is just about the perfect length to go ahead and finish curling that around. Whoop. Just give those a little bit more of a curl inwards. Use my square nose again to just kind of close the swoop that's going on, you know, just finish kind of curling it around. Yeah, I'm thinking that looks pretty darn cool. Now I can always come in and anchor this down by sewing it down, and I could even undo this and kind of reshape it just a little bit, because that does go higher than I want it to. I want it to come a little bit more down, so why don't we just go ahead and do that first. Sometimes though, when you overplay your hand, which I did on this middle one here, I overplayed my hand, and well, I suffered the consequences for it. Okay, now let's go ahead and curl these guys. Now when I've got a hold of this, I'm holding onto right here, holding it backwards. My finger here is holding on to this guy, kind of trying to hold it down and in place and putting a lot of pressure right down here. So that way it holds its shape and it can't really move around while I am trying to adjust this area up in here. It doesn't look like it's going to work out as nice and neatly as I would hope. So what I could do is wrap one of these wires at a time around here, because these 3 wires, they aren't attached to each other. Right in here, they're only attached to each other up in this area. So I do have some options. I can wrap this one around this back wire here. So if I lift this back wire up, and it could be overplaying my hand again. Go ahead and give this a bit of a curl. Yeah, there we go. And then hook it around. There we go. And then just kind of close that little hoop that's there. And that's pretty easy to do. It's just, I don't want to say smashing it, but where that's kind of what I'm doing, is just smashing this part down to the bottom of that hoop. There we go. Now that guy has got a pretty good grip on this, so overall these guys should not go anywhere I don't want them to. They also hide this little area that has got a hold of this whole corner. So that does add some protection to that. I just gotta find a place to either anchor this one last wire, or why not just curl it, and then I can build a little bit more structure over the top of this area. But overall, that's fun. Now I can build up some... That cat's talking to me. Sorry, I had to reply. I can go ahead and kind of build this area up a little bit more. I'm going to kind of snake that up that way. Maybe go ahead and pull this back this direction a little bit. That makes for a pretty fun little piece. I think I'm going to make a couple more wires like this, but I'm going to use different weaves each time, and I might even put a completely coiled wire, straight, just one wire, coiled, and a couple of just plain wires, just bare plain wires, to add to the mystique of this side, making this side feel heavy. So from this point, I think I'm going to go ahead and try to resolve some of these guys up here and figure out which one of them is going to end up being my hoop for my overall piece. And I think it'll be just these 2 super long pieces, and I think the rest of these guys can be better used elsewhere. Actually, let us use them to kind of fill in a little bit of that area. And curl this guy in the back, and I'm going to tuck him in behind this ribbon. So that way he can fill the spot pretty much. And I'm going to bring this guy around this way. And we're going to follow that ribbon. Kind of building that up. And I'm going to curl him back here and hide him under the ribbon. Like so. And once again, I think I'm going to just make this guy follow, and maybe these are just all the bare wires I need to achieve the look I kind of want. And curl him up again behind that ribbon. Marvelously easy. Let's go ahead and just finish this guy off and make him as one of those wires I was talking about that was completely wrapped, but as a single wire all by himself. You two get out of my way. When it comes to wrapping a wire like this, I highly recommend doing it this way, but sometimes hindsight is 20/20, and once you get around to building a piece, you might find that I, as the artist, want texture in here. Well, sometimes that's just the way it goes, and not much you can do about it. Unfortunately, you did make your job a little harder on yourself. But do what you gotta do. Just because it's hard, which I don't like that word, just because it's hard doesn't mean that, gives you the license to not do it. I prefer the word challenging. And when I hear the word challenge, I like to rise up to challenges. Just because it's difficult doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. It just means that you get to have more fun than you regularly would. Haha. So yeah, there's the kind of appearance that I was hoping for. And I think I'm going to bring a couple more bare wires involved in this. Mostly because now we got this really cool braid, and then you got this really bright braid right here. And now I feel like some bare pieces need to go in here to help them feel separate from each other. This is plenty of wire. I'm gonna have to sew this guy down to that there. That's all right. So that way he quits popping. He'll pop at the right times. And this is a very simple weave that I like to do that helps span gaps. And just let me grab some wire here. Now this is more wire than I'm really going to need for this part, but that's perfectly okay. So what I'm going to do for this, I got myself a little bit of tail there, and I'm going to wrap it around a couple of times. Now I'm going to slowly pull this tighter and tighter and try to use up as much of that tail as I possibly can. I'm going to make it a little shorter each time. That's not easy to do, I understand, and if you can't do that because it just ends up all sliding out from you, then go ahead and just, cut the little tail off so that way you don't have to worry about it. It's not a big deal. But once you get it going around a couple of times, go around the front, nice and long, go around one side, go around the back, nice and long, go around one side, around the front. This is the typical weave I use for kind of like a web effect, a webbing effect, going back and forth over a gap. The crucial thing to keep in mind, and you can make this however you want, add as many or as little as you want, but always keep in mind, in order to keep your webbing, because even if you can go back and forth, which actually that might be a better look for this piece, considering some of the textures I got going on. So back and forth, basically you go around one side, you make a figure 8, go around the other side, make a figure 8, around, figure 8, figure 8, figure 8, And that'll give you this really cool interlace look. But it's very important before you span any kind of gap, whether if you're just going back and forth straight or you're making a figure eight, you have to go around one side a complete time before you then turn around and span the gap. Because otherwise you are not going to like how your weave turns out. It kind of ends up being a little soggy and ends up being springy. So as you go further and further, these pieces may be, instead of being nice and neat like this, those middle pieces, they are the only parts that are holding, but then the rest of it starts buckling. And then you try to push it down so that way it's nice and tight, but then it gets springy and it keeps wanting to add gaps. So it's always important, what was that last off? You do your figure eight, go around once, around twice, figure eight, around again. So that way your weave looks nice, cohesive, and tight. If you just go figure eight the entire way through, you're not gonna like how it ends up looking. You're gonna like how it looks in the beginning, but it's gonna get worse and worse as you go. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump ahead here, so that way you guys are not bored to absolute tears watching me do this and wanting me to just move on to the next part. And if you, basically the magic of YouTube is that you got a pause button rather than watching TV, so you can always pause it if you want to go ahead and finish weaving your own section and then press play when you are ready to continue. But I will see you in the not so distant future. Bye! So I got done weaving that, and then I made my loop around. All I did is just come around, and then we got our little wires right here. And in order to connect the back to the front, I made sure it's nice and tight, my weave. I scooted it up and tried to get this as close as I can there. And so I'm going to take this guy, basically I want to tie it to the back, nice and tight, and hide it up underneath some of that wire that we wrapped around, nice and snug and safe. And then I'm going to do the same with the other side. I'm going to bring it down just the tiniest bit, so that way it's a little bit more in front of the last wire we just put down. There we go, like so. Bring it on around. And he was a little bit on the longer side, so I'm going to cut some of that back so that way I can just curling and tucking up underneath someplace. Which probably is going to be the exact same place I tucked the other one, but I'm going to make sure that's nice and tight. And it looks like I need to cut a little bit more, actually. There you go. And now, tuck him in. Make everybody nice and snug, tuck them into bed. Nope. There. Now will you go in? Go to bed. There you go. And there we have ourselves a little area for our next wire. Okay, my cat just fell off of the fireplace stoop there. That was... She's always been a klutzy cat, but it's funny every time. Oh well. But there's that there, and this is the tail from all of this, and I guess there's no reason for him to be there no more. So, nice and close, and there's we has it. Scrap bin. That piece will probably get used for another project though. It won't be a permanent scrap bin piece. Actually, could probably use it to anchor this dude down. Another time, another time. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make up a series of other wires with just a few other weaves. I think what I'm going to do is 2 wires. And I'm going to go basically kind of mimic this, except instead of 3, it's just going to be the 2 where one is going to get wrapped, the other one is going to be pretty much bare. I'm going to give it a bigger gap and just make up a few different weaves. So Art Cat's here, you know. Actually, she's stealing my water out of my water glass. I've been fighting her about this for about 15 years now. I'm never going to get her to stop doing it. I've relented. But I'm going to go ahead and make up a few wires. They're all going to be about the same length as the one that I made here ever so long ago for a different project. And I'll get back with you guys. So, see you in a bit. So I've gotten this guy done, and where here I put a gap of 7, here I put a gap of 13. Whoop, right there. So I'm going to go ahead and give this guy a little snip. Get all that out of my way. And I'm going to put this next ribbon on, and I think a great place to maybe start is to try to tuck him up underneath. Actually, I think I'll turn him around a little bit. Here we go. There, and he's tucked up there. And basically, if you remember where those 2 wires that I put through the hole there and they branched off into a V, that's what I'm sticking him up underneath, is that V that's underneath there. I'm just going to kind of follow what I did before here. So push this guy back where he belongs, or where he's going to end up being. There we go. And now I have a basic template. So I'm going to go ahead and curl this guy so that way I can hook him around that V that's under there. I think Art Cat's thinking about getting in the way. Yes, she is. Really shouldn't probably call her Art Cat. She's more like the anti-Art Cat. I curled it just a little too much. There we go. Whoop, wrong way around. There we go. Now that's hooked there. Let's go ahead and move this on down here. There we go. That looks mighty fine to me. So I'm going to just basically come in here, and where that little hook, if you can see him right there, I'm just going to basically push that down over. There we go. So now that's not going to let go from there right now. And I'm going to go ahead and just make it better fit this area. I want to keep him from twisting on me, which is what he's wanting to do right now. So I'll just kind of grab a hold of it and put him back the way I want him to be. And I think I'll crisscross over here. Think about how I want to end it, because I would like to cover up some of this going on back here, or hide it. So I think what I will do, and I think I'm going to lash all these guys down after I'm done with this ribbon, but I think I'm basically going to take this ribbon and I'm going to curl him around, and being careful, and this is where dowel rods will come in handy. It'll help with keeping this guy from wanting to spin on you. or change around and rotate and the like. And slide him underneath here for an interesting little effect. Or he just doesn't want to. You know, it's whatevers. You know what, I think I'm going to go ahead and lasso both of these guys down right now because he's a bit of too much of a pain to be messing with at the moment. So I will go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to lash them down pretty much right here to this side wire. Be the best possible spot. And then I'll figure out what to do with this and show you where I went. Alrighty. Okay, so I went ahead and lassoed these guys down to this wire right here, which is this wire over here. And then I curled this guy, mostly using this. And, but you gotta be very careful to make sure that you don't accidentally put so much pressure that you end up breaking your woven wire. Pretty much I took him off to the side before I lashed him down and just hand bent it around these guys, the round nose. And then once that was done, this 3 base wire ribbon here, if you remember back in the beginning, I curled one of its base wires around this wire, and then I curled the other 2 up in this direction. Well, I took the base wire that was opposite this one, the other one that's kind of slightly bare on the other side, and it was so close to here that I basically went ahead and took my weaving wire and I lashed these 2 together so that way it's nice and sturdy right there. Has a way to hold itself, and it also puts pressure on this side to hold this wire in, so that way it's not all just, that whole responsibility is not just on this one wire. And I made sure that that looked fairly decent from this side, even though you can see that wire from the front in there, and I think it still looks pretty nice. It kind of looks like these guys came over and hooped around. So I'm going to kind of continue with that kind of feel. I'm going to have him kind of come over and just underneath that, kind of almost like it's been braided in the back, but obviously when you turn it over it's not a braid. But from the front it looks like there might be braiding involved. And then let's see here, I'm going to rotate these guys around a little bit so that way they're facing forward. Now I'm going to come in here and kind of make that guy fit in a little bit. Like so. I got a pretty tight little turn right here. There we go. And I think I'm gonna call that quits with this ribbon. So now I gotta figure out how I'm going to end him. And I think what I want to do is I'm gonna go this direction. I wonder. Maybe I'm going to tuck him down inside of here, this kind of V that's going on. Let's take a look-see-lo. I might be a little bit too long, but that's no big deal to give him a little bit of a haircut there. Yeah, I think he's too long to fit in there nice and neatly at the moment, but not a problem to deal with or not a big deal anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and lasso this corner down so that way I'm not fighting with it, and get this all in position, all nice and neat. Kind of give it a little bit more sway, a little better there. And then we'll go ahead and, actually, you know, I'll just move that there. Well, I'm going to go ahead and lasso that down, and then we'll play with this. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this follow this a little bit more, then come off this direction. It'll help kind of hide some of this mess here, use up some of this extra length that we don't need, and then we can always cut it back and tie it down, where even though we're just hiding the ends of that wire in there, we're going to lasso it down in this area so that way it is stuck down. So be back in a second. Alright, so I unwove some of this wire that was on the end here. I just cut off about, maybe 2/3 of an inch off of that. I went ahead, tacked him down here, followed, went around a little bit, used up a little bit of my extra space, unwove some of the end, and I pretty much just curled these 2 wires of this ribbon and tuck them in just like I've been doing this entire time with the project. Now from here I'm going to take this wire that I unwound and I'm going to thread him through someplace, maybe. It's going to take a while to find out where he's going to pop out at. There we go. And I'm just going to start wrapping him around and tying him into this area. Just as a little bit of added security. And then this guy comes across and covers up quite a bit of the wire that we've been playing with back there as it is. So that ends up working out most effectively, I feel. Now I'm not going to cut this guy just yet. I've gone around 3 times, but we don't know. There might be something else we want to play with, but I think this guy is turning out most excellently. Shaping with my fingers a little bit here and there. I'll let you guys just create from there. So I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. I've been kind of worried about making too many projects that have a lot of silver in it. The silver is very, very shiny, and there's not a lot of contrast and shadowing with it, especially with a bright light to try to help you guys see what it is I'm doing. So let me know if you want me to go back to just using copper, or if you guys can even see what it is that I'm doing with all this bright silver. But otherwise, thank you for coming and hanging out, and I do have an Etsy account if you'd like to go and check that out to help support my channel. I also have a Patreon as well if you'd like to help support the channel that way. $1 a month, I don't ask for any more. And yeah, I do hope you guys had fun and behave yourselves. Have a good one. Bye.